so much for being our guest speaker, by the way.
You're welcome.
I'm really happy that you've agreed to support us with this event. And I'd like to say also that Kirsty sponsored our Christmas party a few years back, so we're all very happy about that too.
Let's face it, I know that most people just come for the booze and the chat, and that's okay with me. But hopefully if I say one thing interesting, that would be cool too.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
We'll find out. But just to tease your hopes a little bit, just as an introduction, I'll say that Kirsty is the founder and CEO of iMultiply, which she started in 2012 in a cupboard in someone else's office. Was that under the stairs in the office?
It wasn't quite under the stairs, but it was tiny.
Yeah, but you managed to fit two employees in there as well in your cupboard.
I did.
Wow. Okay. And so you fired your first hire after 8 weeks, but now...
I did, and can I just say, since it's being recorded, that it was nothing to do with them. It was my inexperience of knowing how much input they would need. They were actually very good.
Yeah.
Just weren't right.
Yeah. You were just over... Kirsty's very good at making decisions, and made that one a bit too quick.
Yeah.
But now you have 23 employees in 3 cities, and those are obviously Edinburgh,
Glasgow and Belfast.
Oh, that's cool, the Celtic cities. And you, for those of you who don't know, you also joined Power Equity 3 years ago, and you're the chair of the Hi-Fi Corner on the Edinburgh Committee of Institute of Directors and on the advisory board for Tech Advocate Scotland.
Yeah.
Wow. And you're running your own business.
Yeah. But you realise, or I've realised, that get rid of imposter syndrome. People just seem to like perspectives and opinion. If you can provide a perspective and opinion and challenge other people and actually listen, then you've got a lot to offer. So. And
it's obviously giving as well, isn't it?
I think so.
Contributing, trying to make a difference.
Because if I think back to what really helped me when I started, when I was on my own, it was how giving people were of their time and expertise, and if you ask, or if I asked, I got a lot in return. Yeah. So I feel that it's only fair to give that back if people ask.
And that's one of the reasons why people in this room shouldn't be shy about asking for people to help them out as well.
Yeah, if you don't ask, you don't get.
Yeah, and that's a great thing about this community. We can, certainly there's people in the room that you can ask, for help, or you can get to other people through us. If you need be. Somebody asked me to connect them with Gareth Williams recently, so I did that on LinkedIn. And Gareth, he thanked me recently as well. So what do you think about Edinburgh then as this entrepreneurial ecosystem?
I think, and I'm biased because I'm from Edinburgh, and I guess I'm part of that ecosystem in a way. But I think we're very, very lucky if you're in Edinburgh to be part of the ecosystem, because I think, look at tonight, lots of people are willing to give, they're willing to rock up to events, they're willing to speak to each other. And actually, as I said before, if you see someone that you feel's been really successful or could really add value, actually if you ask them, and if you ask them in the right way, in my experience, most people will do their best to say yes, even though you think, oh, how could they have time, they're running so many businesses, they're so successful. But actually, if they can, they will. Yeah. So how fortunate are we to be part of that? I still think there's some work to do with, we're very good I think with startups, and there's still some work to do with scale-ups, and I think there's still some work to do with our international exposure. So I think we've got this nice sort of hub going in Scotland, but there's more we need to do from a marketing point of view internationally. But that's okay, there's work to do, but as a foundation, I think it's very, very strong for the size of country that Scotland is.
So when you were first thinking of starting your own business, and you told me that you worked in this room, this building for 4 years before you did that. So it's kind of deja vu for you coming back.
I haven't been back since, so this is really weird.
Yeah. So when you were a newbie thinking about doing your own thing at the very the beginning, what was your mindset? How did you view the world then?
It's such an interesting question. Just to learn on that, so I'll come back to that question. Right? But see if I could go back now. I've started doing it now. I wish I'd written down how I felt at the time. I wish I'd written down something like once a week or once a month, my takeaways or learns for the month. someone told me to do this a year ago and I was like, that sounds a bit dull, or I just did it. And now when I look back, I'm like, oh my goodness, look how much I've done in the last year. So now when I get asked a question about how it felt at the time, you very quickly, I think anyway, for me, you very quickly forget all the stuff you've come through, all the challenges that you've overcome. So I do reflect on it, but obviously memory 7 years on isn't going to be as accurate as the memory.
So you've forgotten the hard times,
I have a fantastic ability to forget the challenges like that and remember the good times. But I remember people saying to me, I always knew that I wanted to have a business because I came from a family that had a family business, which I knew wasn't something that I was going to go into full time. And I know people were saying to me, they said, well, they gave me all the obstacles, it wouldn't work, or you'll never get funding in the current economy, or you'll never, or there's too many recruitment companies, so they don't need another one, no one will ever use you, or, and I remember just thinking, well, as long as I can justify what makes me different, and if I can justify what makes me different, then I will get the funding. I think I was, in a way, just had this naivety, and naivety is actually something you should harness. Now, naivety is a bit different to ignorance. So I used to think I was ignorant. I've changed it to naive. I think naive is positive, because then you're not, you don't constrain yourself with like barriers or restrict yourself. Ignorance is maybe just, you could be overly positive and then.
So this naivety then prevented you from lacking confidence.
Yeah, I would say so. I would say so. And don't get me wrong, there was still the odd time where I had like imposter syndrome or, oh sugar, what am I doing? But I would just squash that really, really quickly, and I just went for it. And even now, I go into meetings now, all the time, board meetings about buying companies, and inside voice is like, they have no idea that I have no idea what I'm talking about. You rock up to 9, you're like, I'm the one on this side, not that. No one knows that I don't have a clue. Yeah. Obviously, you're doing, you're clearly doing something right, but I think we all just feel like that, and I think that that's okay. And I don't know how many people just admit it. But there you go, I've admitted it.
I think earlier on today I saw this email come in, and I was like, oh no, it's a rejection email of some description, and I used to suffer a lot, from that. And when I opened the email, it was actually positive, and I was like. Okay, so you weren't struggling with a lack of confidence, but you realised earlier on that you had these gaps that I was highlighting in my presentation earlier.
Yeah, well, like the gaps. I mean, I had all the sort of drive and motivation, and didn't have a clue how to go about it. But actually what I did do early on, and I still do now, is I did always think about who could help me. Who's got the answer? Who else can I use? And I guess one of the best things I did was I identified someone in Scotland who had started recruitment businesses from scratch and turned them into multi-million-pound businesses, and they'd done it a number of times. And I thought, I need that person to help me. And I just phoned them and persuaded them to help. Wow. And now we've become good friends.
And so that's the perfect who to help you to go from A to B.
Yeah. But I think the important thing about the who, which I only realised when you just put that up, is that, and you always have to evaluate the who. And actually the challenge that my business is going through at the moment is that the who's for the first 7 years are not the who's that are going to take us to the next 7. And even the first 3 years, we've had to do some changes, and I think you have to constantly review it. Sure. And that is quite a lot of energy. Yeah. It's like when you've done oh, I know what direction I'm going in, yay! And then like a year later, you're like, oh, I really need to revisit all of that hard work that I did. You just have to constantly, because it's not an end journey, really. It's not an end point. I don't think we're aiming. Well, my view is you shouldn't really be aiming for an end point. It is a journey that you
want to enjoy the journey and not necessarily the destination.
Yeah.
Because your perspective always grows and changes.
Exactly.
So you wouldn't say that you suffered from hubris or arrogance or any of those kind of things then?
We've all got an ego, don't we? I think I'd be really, if I didn't say, oh, I loved when someone said I was successful, or I love, we've all got an ego. But I think what I've learned more recently is, so I got some coaching a few years ago, and that did make me a lot more self-aware as a person, and I think that helped get my ego in check and realise that this is you always need to learn and develop, and there's always stuff to learn. So I would like to think I was never arrogant, but you get cocky though, don't you? Business is going well and you're like, yay, but it's going well until the goalposts change.
Yeah.
And you have to keep changing the goalposts if you want to grow, I think.
Yeah. And you need to keep investing in relationships and cultivating people who will help you in the future.
You do that, and that's a lot of work. But coming to things like this, is really helpful. And also coming to things like networking is also a great way to build sales as well. And actually, I've tracked how many sales I brought into the business from networking, and I think that that's a fantastic thing to track as well. If you can track sales and advisors, then it's brilliant. Because
obviously, it's one of your channels to finding business, knowing people. You're in the people business, and it's very important to do that.
It is.
So you've already told us what you might do differently if you went back in time.
No, I've got a longer list than that, James.
So what else? What else would you say?
So, I would not promote. Well, this is a difficult one. I potentially wouldn't promote people before they're ready, or hire in people above their experience level, because it actually causes more problems later on. The flip side to that argument is, though, that if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have kept those people or got what I needed out of those people for that period of time. I think if you do that, and that's just what you need to do at the time, you just have to be prepared that that's a delayed headache, and don't kid yourself.
Yeah.
And the other mistakes I've made, so many, but the other thing is, I used to think, right, I really be decisive and be really quick to make quick decisions, and I've been really good at making quick decisions, and it's gone in my favour, but it's also gone totally against me. So for example, I was trying to get into the Glasgow market, and I met someone, and she said, I'd love the job, I could set up your Glasgow office, but you know what, I'm not taking the job. I'm going to take the job with a competitor because they've already got an office there and they've already got a team for me to manage. And I said, hang on a minute. And this was like Wednesday. I said, I could have you a Glasgow office by Monday and someone to manage. And she's like, well, if you can do that, I would take the job. So I committed, and I actually managed to pull that off. Great. That's an example of quick decision that worked well, and I've had the Glasgow division for 3 years now, nice team of 8 and growing. I did the same decision making somewhere else, which because it's being filmed, let's not go into, but disaster, because I hadn't planned it, I hadn't looked into it, and it was too quick a decision. And actually, I realise now that sometimes, yes, you've got to be decisive, but there's also the power of time. And also if there's problems, I used to try and fix the problems really quickly, and it would just create me more time or energy. But actually, if I sat on it for a bit, the team would actually solve it between them, and it didn't take any of my time. So that's one of my biggest learns recently, is the power of time, which goes against being driven and impatient. Yeah.
So that's one of the leadership lesson then, is you don't necessarily want your team to become dependent on you.
Yes. Yeah, well that's and that's really hard. If you're a founder and you've gone from one person, then to 2, then to 5, then to 10, then to 20, I think the only way, and that's been my journey, is that I've always had to change my role, and I've always had to continuously develop, but make sure that I'm then developing the team. And I was having this chat with Mike earlier, wherever he is. One of the biggest learns is, as a founder or a CEO of a business, you will always be further ahead in your thinking than the rest of your team. So as your team grows and gets bigger, when it's 1, 2, 3 people, it's easier to bring everyone with you, because you're running probably most things past them anywhere, you're chatting all the time in the office. When you get to sort of 15, 20 people, or even just a few people but across geographies, it then becomes really challenging to remember to bring everyone on the journey. And that's the stage that I'm at now. And that's a big learn. So you've got to remember to develop your team, but you've got to remember to bring everyone along. And then things, naturally, that takes a bit longer than you probably like.
So you need to start investing time to do different things.
Yes, you have to invest time in people all the time.
Yeah.
But then I'm in the people business that we don't have a product, it's a service. So if I didn't invest in my people all the time, I would,
So, well, I guess if you try to drill down into that a little bit, you can either write effective communiques, manuals, systems and processes for people to read. This is the way we do things here, or you can develop your managers to look after the people that they're responsible for.
Yeah.
So, which of those do you find easier?
Well, I can't write manuals. Don't ask me to write emails. Anything too detailed is just not my strength. We've all got strengths and weaknesses. I'm a people person, and I will sit with our leadership team and discuss what they're then doing. We're now at the point where we're starting to create a bit of structure, but staying relatively. It's like trying to get the advantages of being a flat structure, but giving the opportunity of being a hierarchical structure. It's a bit of a challenge. But I think what I would have done earlier is I was going on all these networking events, and you'll always, not always, but quite often you'll learn something from the speaker. Maybe not tonight, but you take something away. And then I was going on other training events, but I was forgetting to encourage the rest of my team to do the same. And I kind of think I justified it because I'm like, well, I'm the founder, I'm the CEO, I am the one that needs to be out and about. Actually, what I would have done is I would have encouraged my team earlier to get out and about and meet their peers in other organisations. Because then I feel like then my job would have been easier because they would have been hearing other people's perspectives all along, not just mine.
Yeah.
And that's how I would have brought them along probably quicker than I have.
Well, that's a fresh thought. I haven't really heard that from anybody else before.
That's good.
Yeah, so one great takeaway. And obviously, we're talking about growing businesses here and building teams, and that's the process when your business is starting to scale. For you, I guess it was easy in that you had, you knew it was very clear. Your product was clearly defined.
Yeah.
Some people in this room are creating something new that nobody has used before or heard of before. And it's trying to solve a problem that's been around for a long time. Do you have any words of advice or any anything to offer towards that?
In terms of building
Levitating skateboards or...
Yeah. So you're having to educate your customer base essentially because they might not necessarily realise that it's what they need when it's totally
I think a lot of us in this room have that problem. We've got to educate our customers. We'll find the customers who are... I often say there's 4 levels of customers. One who don't know they have got a problem. Like say someone's got cancer. They don't know they've got cancer, right? They're just living their life.
Bit of a deep problem, James.
It's a great way to explain it. And then you've got someone who thinks, something's not quite right. I've got this, I'm not going to do anything about it. Head in the sands. And then you've got someone who's like, oh my goodness, where's the doctor? I'm going to get this fixed. And then you've got someone who's been cured. Yeah? So it doesn't need your services anymore. And it's expensive to try and educate. You got cancer. You need to go and see the doctor. You really ideally want to meet the people who are looking for a solution. So you need to be discovered and found by people who are, your innovators. And that's where you make most of your money and servicing those people.
So that's a huge marketing task, isn't it? Really, in terms of like that education and marketing piece, and I think that I can see that being really, really challenging. And I guess what I would say is that as the team grows, and I'm in a different situation because I don't have this really unique product. The recruitment companies already existed, albeit our way of working was unique. So there was a bit of an educational piece to sort of let people know why we're different. If I were in the situation of having something new, putting a lot of money into marketing, but also really thinking about the culture that you're creating for your team, because ultimately your biggest advocates and your biggest salespeople, as it were, even though they are not technically salespeople, are going to be your team and your advisors. And actually the best thing I did to raise the profile of iMultiply was to persuade some really high profile people in Scotland to be associated with us. And I think if I took the same principle to a business that still needed that market, that education piece, I would do the same again. I would try and take high profile people that the market listens to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I would get them on board.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they would become the advocates, as would the employees in your team.
Yeah. And it's just a question of money. Quite often, I do know that people, if you know who Brian Tracy is or Tony Robbins, if you want to get a selfie with them, you need to pay them like 500 quid. All right, that's what it takes. Generally, don't say, yeah, sure. You've got to get that picture taken. And I'm not saying the people you're associating were like that, but it's certainly trying to benefit from their halo and their endorsement.
Yes, but actually that's where the bit of thought around what are you actually offering them
Other than money.
Okay, they might be this big hitter with loads of experience and you don't have the background, but actually what are you offering them? They get to work with you. Why are you awesome? What have you got that's the next big thing? And actually how are you helping their reputation and helping them to give something back, and whatever the angle you can come up with. Actually, I've got a lot of really experienced big hitters to help me, and trust me, I did not pay them either at all or good money. And I was I spent time building the relationship, and I felt like we were giving them something back.
Yeah.
So maybe that's where the arrogance comes in. Maybe that's where you need a little bit of that, where you go, hang on a minute, this is what I'm going to do for you, and you're going to do for me, and it's a partnership.
So you do look at the startups from the other side of the table a little bit now as well, don't you?
Yep. We have a lot of our clients actually are early stage businesses, maybe looking for their first finance director or their first bookkeeper, starting to bring finance in house, and I love that because I just love hearing the stories, and also I guess that's where we can help with. If anyone ever wants to phone me, I don't charge for it, but about building a team or how to find the best finance professionals, because I think if you're raising money or scaling in any way, my personal view is you've got to have such a good finance advisor, which, yes, some of the accountancy firms do a fantastic job, but ultimately they're accountable to the accountancy firm. So my personal view is that if you have a finance director, for example, that just has a couple of clients and that's their reputation, I would rather go with that person in my business than a big accountancy firm.
I was actually looking at the slides of a presentation Ian Ritchie did about 4 or 5 years ago at one of these events, and he said one of the things, the red flags for investors, is when they see the business plan or the financials have been written by an external organisation rather than somebody in the team.
And if you can get a finance consultant to work with you, or even if it was a day a month, and they have a good background, good reputation, you can piggyback off of that. You can have them on your website, for example. You can have that association, and I do think that stands you in very good stead. So
they can either be you pay them part time, or you give them some equity, or whatever. So we're going.
Sorry.
No.
No.
So we're going to have questions in a minute. So please be thinking about what questions you'd like to ask Kirsty in a minute. But from your experience with investors, and what kind of words of advice would you give for anyone who's thinking about raising investment for their company?
So I've been on a couple of sides of the coin for that, and I've sat through a number of pitches for investment as well, because I've now been fortunate enough to also do a bit of investment as well. I would honestly say please think about who's doing the pitch, because you might be the person that knows the technical elements of your product, but when you're pitching to investors, they don't need to know the minute detail. Actually, they will definitely not know as much as you do, and that pitch and how that comes across is really, really important. So who's best placed to do the pitch, who's actually got the best interpersonal skills or public speaking skills to do that. You can still be on, it might be you, but if it's not you, you can still be on hand to answer questions. I've seen some fantastic pitches and I've seen some car crashes. And, with the slides and things, and you just think, oh, crikey, either no one's given you straight feedback or you've not practiced. So it's like when James said earlier about you get the opportunity to stand up. And I know for a lot of people, public speaking is nerve-wracking because, and it's like an innate thing that's built in us that we don't want to be embarrassed. We're a connected social group, so to stand up isolates you. But that practice is absolutely invaluable and constructive feedback. So if you're thinking about pitching for investment, practice, think about who's going to do it, and also have you had a finance professional look through your figures, because the other thing that comes back is around valuations, and that just turns people off. You could have the best idea in the world, but if you've got figures or ambitions that are way too one-sided, then you kind of get laughed off.
So it's investors I associate with often say that Edinburgh is cheap. You get a cheaper deal here. So effectively, investing in the company to get more equity for their money than you will in London. But on the flip side of that is that the investors in Scotland, you can trust them, whereas investors in London, it's who knows, because investors. I don't know if you've ever seen Silicon Valley, the TV series, but there was a character, this crazy investor in that program, and so it's good. It's people like that in Edinburgh will be identified, and bad actors would be ejected, because we have a tight startup community, and we all talk about each other, don't we? Which is good fun sometimes. Right, we're going to open up to questions now. We have about 5 minutes for questions. We're going to try and. We've got 10 minutes for questions, so that's great. Okay, Tom.
I'm really interested to know how you made the transition from what you were doing before to running this business, specifically around how you got that kind of first sale, or what that sort of first run on the ladder looked like.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I did work in recruitment before. I worked in recruitment for 4 years. So actually, to be honest, that transition for me, for that first bit about making the first sale, I was so determined, and actually, I remember just there was a phone, and I was like this, phoning everyone in my cupboard, phoning everyone I know, everyone that could potentially help me. I was at the opening of an envelope, like every event, for the first couple of years, and actually, the sales. For that reason, the sales started to come, but that's because of the industry that I'm in. It's relationship driven. So if you were quick at making relationships, you could get the initial sales. The challenge for me was actually transitioning from a recruitment consultant to a recruitment manager to a business director to an MD, and actually now I'm at the point of looking at how do I now transition out of that to look at bigger picture stuff for maybe a bigger group of companies or acquisitions, and then I would need to bring in an MD. So actually, I know that would be a different challenge to some people in the room that's just about making the first sale. But for me, it was a different transition. But actually, if you related transitions to the fact that no matter what transition you're going through, it's a transition, then actually what I've done for every single one, it goes back to the who can help. Who can help me lift my head and recognise why things aren't working? Who can help me sort of, take me out of the business to work on the business? It's a bit of a cliche, but that's when I got advisors or got an executive coach, or and even with sales, if at times that I've been struggling to have as many sales as I'd like, the best thing I did was just to take a moment and go, right, hang on a minute, what's not working? Or is it that actually I'm convinced what I'm doing is right and I just need to give it a bit longer? Because I have seen as well people, especially with sales, they chop and change so quickly because they're not getting the quick results. But actually, consistency is a real winner, providing you're in your heart of hearts, your gut believes you're doing the right thing. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but.
So there is another way in which you can get people, you can find your who's, and those are people who've written books. And there was two books that came to mind when you were speaking there. One is The E-Myth by Michael Gerber, and he talks about the three different types of, in a business you have the technician, the guy that's really good at doing the thing, then the manager who's, can move everything around, organise things, and then you've got the entrepreneur or the CEO. And just by reading The E-Myth, the book, you can work out where you are and think about what you want to be in the future. I definitely don't want to be a manager. I want to outsource all that. I hate minutia. Don't want to do that. And I'm quite a good technician, I would say, but I've got to. This helps me. And also the other book is Good to Great, and the enemy of the great is the good. But the successful. This book talks about the characteristics of someone who builds a truly great company as a person. So if anyone is into audiobooks or reading, then I recommend them. So any other questions? Josh?
At this point, what motivates you to keep growing your company?
Personal challenge. That is my only motivator, actually. And I would, I want to protect iMultiply because it is doing well. It's a growing, profitable business with a great team. But I could stay in the MD role there, and it would still grow organically, and my life would be great in many respects. But I feel like it's not out of my comfort zone anymore, and that's my motivator to continue to grow. So really, I actually had this bit of a meltdown with this. I met this guy. He was the chairman of another big professional services firm, and I met him for a coffee because someone had connected us, and I said, look, I'm having this major issue between my personal aspirations, my work aspirations. I can't tell them apart, and I'm having this meltdown because I don't know what's right for iMultiply versus what's right for me versus, it's all interlinked because iMultiply is me, but it's not me, but had that. And so I said to this guy over the coffee, he said, oh look, I'm a strategy guy. I said, everyone's a strategy guy. He said, no, I reckon I could help you get all those ideas and thoughts from your head about where to go next on paper. So I had the session, because it's timely, because it was only a couple of weeks ago. And I said, look, he got me down to what's really motivating you, what do you really want? And actually, do you know what? If it was purely money, for example, I'd sit tight and I'd do what I'm doing. And money's nice, don't get me wrong, and you need money to do other things, but that's not my main motivator. So it's this pushing myself out of my comfort zone and experiencing life, because I kind of just think, again, it's a cliche, but you only live once, so for me, I just want to try new things, and then he gave me permission. I didn't need his permission, but it then allowed me to give me permission to myself. It's funny how things, you just need someone to say something once. Gave myself permission to say, actually, my personal aspirations and my business aspirations are the same, and that's okay, providing for me, I wanted to protect the people that I've got as well. I don't want to put them in jeopardy because of my personal aspirations. But that's quite an interesting and quite a topical for me journey at the moment. Do I risk this to do this? Do I not? Do I? But if that answers your question, it's purely my ego wanting new experiences.
Cool. Wow. Great question. Thanks.
Sorry. You mentioned before the transition between going from a startup to a scale-up.
Yeah.
I see a lot of big companies today are saying that they have more of a startup vibe. So what would you say are the main differences between a startup and a scale-up?
Well, that's a good question. That's a really good question. I mean, and again, if I just relate it to, if I think back to my experience, I mean, a startup is like, who the hell's doing what? And I'll be emptying the bins, who's emptying the bins, who's doing this, right? Who's writing this on the website? And it's like all a wee bit chaotic. And again, it's just my experience, but hopefully you can relate to it. And it's you've kind of just got to roll your sleeves up, and everyone's doing everything. And that's what's needed. Scale up, I think though, that only gets you so far because you're not then purely playing to everyone's strengths. If you've got a team that are good at everything, and everyone's good at everything, that how realistic really is that when you're past a few people? Because not everyone's good at everything. So to me, the difference between that mode and then scale up's more about getting a bit more process, structure, everyone playing to their strengths, See, even my voice is calmer because it's feeling a little bit calmer, only a little bit. But to me, in those terms, that's the key difference. But actually, I will ask that question to people over drinks because I think that's a really interesting question. And also, I think as well, startup is still about finding your feet and working out maybe what direction you're going in. But I think scale up potentially is more concrete. Right, we're a bit clearer. We're going in this direction. That's mine.
So I would say that a startup's either in a cupboard or a shed, and a scale-up's in WeWork. Yeah. With a nice free beer. Okay. Any? Yeah.
What were your biggest challenges going from that sort of technician phase, being a recruiter, into not being a recruiter? That seems to be the phase people struggle with the most, sort of first transition. What were your struggles there, and have you any advice on that?
Yeah, because a lot of people have said to me, "Oh, did you struggle like giving up?" Like, 'cause I stopped recruiting a few years ago, actually doing the delivery. A lot of people are like, "Did you struggle with that bit?" Actually, I was delighted to give up more things because I couldn't do it all.
So what stage did you give up recruiting?
So I was probably 4 years in.
So you're still
So
doing
about
a lot
3
of
years.
management?
Yeah. So I guess I was doing management and delivery. But the biggest challenge, and actually it's still a challenge but in a different way, is I'm trying to transition to one role, suddenly getting pulled back into another. And also, again, this goes back to my point about how usually the founder or CEO's head's a bit further along, but your teams might not be. And it might be your team pulling you back, or it might just be you in your comfort zone pulling you back. And actually, so even now, like I could have a meeting about shareholder agreements or potential buying another business, and then an hour later I'm talking about the slight wording on the website, and your brain's got to switch. And then at the end of the day when I go home, I think, actually, should I have delegated that bit of the website? Why did I not? They would have been better. So actually, I think the biggest challenge is not allowing yourself, but we all do it, to be pulled back into your comfort zone. But then I think, just I'm thinking out loud, how do you recognise that you've been pulled back into your comfort zone? And that's where time for reflection, and for me, getting an executive coach. Someone told me 3 years in, get a coach. I was like, shit, don't need a coach. I know what I'm doing and I can work it all out. And actually coaches, that's all they do. A real true coach, which is different to a mentor, they're not telling you anything, they're just asking you questions to allow you to unlock your own, own potential. It was the best thing I ended up ever doing, because that helped me with the transition, not being pulled back in. As I say, I'm still not perfect though, because that still happens.
So can I ask you a question?
You've been asking me questions all night, James, so I'm going to allow it now.
When you dived into the website, tweaking,
yeah.
What did you take your eye off the ball?
Then that's the point. Mind you, I probably forfeited lunch or going to the toilet because I was that busy. But yes, like you're then switching your mind. Then your mind, it takes longer to get back to the strategic stuff.
Yeah.
And I think, but right, everyone hears and speakers that you've got to work on the business, not in the business, and we all know that. But the actual reality of the business being in a position to allow you to do that. So I'm the chair of my family business now, and my brother won't mind me saying he's in that stage where he's like, well, Kirsty, I can't go to events and learn from people. I don't have the time, and I don't have the time for this, and I don't have the time for that. And you know what? I can totally see it, because I can see it from his perspective, because he's just thinking about the day-to-day and he's just thinking about the sales. And actually for me to come in and go, they've got to be working on the business, not in the business, they'd probably slap me. But I think you've then got to think, okay, baby steps. Everything is baby steps. You can't go from here to here. What would allow you half an hour in a week to do a bit of reflection, for example? And I think sometimes that's what speakers, or when you read things, it doesn't come across properly. Stop working in it, work on it. Yeah, great. Well, I've got target to get sales, and we need to pay people.
But if you were thinking about trying to help your team become more autonomous and less dependent on you, and you were measuring how well you were doing in that, then you would recognise that the mistake you made was actually in that development thing.
I missed out on allowing them to. What I should have done is I should have been on a more non-directive coaching mode and said, "Well, how do you think this looks? What do you think needs to happen?"
Yeah.
And that is something. And I'm doing a coaching qualification at the moment to develop that because it's just part of my personal development. And it's all very well until stress kicks in, James, and we all know as soon as you revert back to type, and you think, "Oh, it'd be just quicker if I fix this myself, wouldn't it?"
Yeah.
And then we know, well, it's not really quicker in the long term. But we all do it.
But as long as we recognise and we pick up on these things and we can, try and do better next time, I think that's the key, isn't it?
That is the key. That's why it's continuous development. That's why to me there's never an end journey. There's never an end point.
Yeah. And in some ways, here we are today with this awesome venue, this awesome guest, this awesome T-shirt.
That is an awesome T-shirt.
This is the League of Entrepreneurs T-shirt, by the way. And my daughter Jessie, she's got one of them on as well. It's all improvement, and but now it's time to move on to our get up and pitch. So thank you, Kirsty, for